what can we expect today when Donald Trump makes his first court appearance on these federal charges? Walk us through the process.
Well, it's going to be a pretty mundane experience, very much like what we saw take place in Manhattan when the former president was arraigned in criminal court there. We know that he will be fingerprinted. There's a possibility that his mugshot will be taken. And we know that he will enter into formal plea agreements where he will announce whether he is guilty or non guilty. And also at that time, there will be a date set for preliminary hearings to go over the litany of evidence that has already been provided in the indictment to Donald Trump over this criminal proceeding. Also, we know that there is a different judge that will be participating in this arraignment versus the judge that will actually oversee the trial. And of course, we know that Judge Eileen Cannon is no stranger to many of us because, of course, she oversaw the initial back and forth between the Justice Department and Donald Trump after the raid at his estate in Florida, where they of course, recovered all of these documents. So this is going to be the first, and of course, history in the making, where we see for the first time a former sitting U.S. president actually arraigned on federal criminal charges.
Right, that judge appointed by Donald Trump. Okay, so we have heard from a number of analysts, legal experts, who are talking about the seriousness of these charges, and that's really what distinguishes them from what Trump is facing, still is facing, I guess, in New York. Even his former Attorney General, Bill Barr, said he's toast if even half of it is true. What is the most damning evidence, do you think, against Trump? And what could possibly be his defense for not turning over those documents when he was asked repeatedly to do so?
Well, I think the fact when you read the indictment, it's stunning in the fact that you not only have the pictures of the documents themselves, but you also have Donald Trump in his own words. And that's very stunning because we know Donald Trump over the years has been very careful not to have himself taped. We know he doesn't use email. And so it's always been difficult to actually get information that specifically ties Donald Trump to any nefarious or criminal activity. In this case, however, it's very different because we see audio recordings laid out in the indictment, but we also have Donald Trump's own staff that's also that has access to this information as well. And so all of this together combined makes for a very stinging indictment against the former president. And we know that his public comments and statements have been leading up to this moment that as the president, he had the right to declassify all of this information, which is certainly true. But when we read the indictment, what we see is that he did not actually declassify the information. In fact, we know through the piercing of attorney-client privilege that he actually attempted to work with his own attorneys to keep these documents from the Justice Department as well.
Eric, we were just looking at some live shots, drone shots over the courthouse in Miami, and much is already being said about the lack of a hard perimeter around the federal courthouse. There are questions about security and whether things could really take a turn with protesters outside of court today. Not just as our political analyst, but as an American, are you concerned about things taking a turn today and becoming violent?
I do believe that is something that law enforcement certainly should be prepared for. However, I think it's highly unlikely. Well, I won't say highly unlikely, but I think it's unlikely we will see something like that happen. And one of the reasons why is because I think the fact that so many protesters have been imprisoned for their actions on January 6th, I think that has become a major deterrent for many people actually engaging in such violent activity. However, I do believe that there will be very raucous and very spirited people who will be at this arraignment, very much like what we saw of course, in Manhattan. We were there covering it live, and while you had an enormous police presence, you also had people who were either for or against Donald Trump, and they were there making their voices heard. But otherwise, it was a very peaceful endeavor, and I suspect that's what we will see take place in Miami today as well.
And last question before we run out of time, Eric. You described today maybe fairly mundane. One surprise is going to be who's representing Trump. He's been unable to find lawyers. Two of his main lawyers quit last week. Why is Trump scrambling to find legal support?
Yeah, this is actually, I think, going to be the bane of Donald Trump's existence, particularly as he attempts to ward off this indictment and possibly another coming from Jack Smith regarding the January 6th probe, because we have seen Donald Trump go through a litany of lawyers. And I think this is a case where that it will require a dream team to be able to mount a defense against Jack Smith. Because also we have to remember, Donald Trump is certainly a beloved figure in Southern Florida, but Jack Smith was able to pull together a grand jury of people from that district, that area, who actually came back with this bill of indictment against Donald Trump. So that alone should let him know that this is very serious, and he's going to need the best of the best to be able to combat this very legal indictment that's facing him.
Eric, thank you. As you say, an historic day. Appreciate it.